The Journey of Square Peg, Chapter 20, Homecoming. That night we hardly slept. Watching the familiar buildings intently, we wrestled with the desire to end our journey and the torture of our bodies, for we were ravenous. Yearning for a good meal, weak and aching, Helen and I both agreed to save the last few morsels of food that remained after our children had eaten. We did not know what we would find in there, whether we would have to move on. We had to sacrifice something to ensure our growing children could eat. I hoped beyond hope that the pain in my stomach need only last the night, that the provisions I had stashed in the house had not spoiled or been discovered. The images of a meal played in my mind until the morning. I was woken by the kite, skimming low over the rooftops, calling forlornly as it rode the currents in endless circles and dipped again and again above our house. It seemed to be calling more often than usual. Could I be mistaken that the same one had been with us all this way? Perhaps it sensed the end of our unlikely journey together. Dawn revealed our position in the garden on the opposite side of the road was too exposed, despite our camouflage. The options to retreat if we were compromised were too limited. Waiting was now more risky than moving forward, so it was decided to end our torment. Time to go home. As I brought myself up to one shaking knee, my children fell silent. My wife pushed the tube of her blowpipe forward and loaded a dart, ready to distract and weaken an attacker should I need to retreat. Michael notched an arrow, kneeling too. How many times have we done this? How many times have we approached a building not knowing what might be there? Yet somehow no time before had so much been at stake. I was nervous as I synchronized with my surroundings, the pitch and volume of the buzz in my head rising off the scale. For now, I tuned it out, straining to hear footsteps, a twig snapping, the rustle of leaves on the windless day, an engine. When I was confident we were alone, I rose to my feet and pushed through a hedge, over a low wooden picket fence covered in peeling paint, into the overgrown meadow of next door's front garden. From there, I advanced, staying behind a huge wisteria and taking a moment to scan the windows of the houses behind me. The dawn was turning rapidly today. I needed to make the crossing now or risk being caught completely exposed in broad daylight. Having reached the driveway opposite our house, 3 gardens down from my starting place, I tuned in to some primal wavelength that readied every fibre of my being. Flooded with memories of arriving on the gravel drive in our car, of conversations with our old neighbours in the sunlit front garden, I studied our home intensely. The glass in the porch door nearest the handle was broken, shattered doubtless long ago. The inner door was open, but what I could see of the hallway, with its 1970s parquet, seemed almost as it had the day we left so many years ago. The gully above the gable end had partially collapsed. Sun-bleached curtains hung in the large windows. I turned to look momentarily at my wife and son, cueing the next moment without words. And then, staying low, taking long but fast strides, I crossed the gulf of the road and set foot on the gravel which I had spread with my own hands so many moons ago. The ground came up firm and familiar to meet my feet. I was back on my territory. I was home. Moving faster now, I slipped down the side of the house to the pedestrian door of the adjoining garage, then waited a moment to see if my movement had caused any stir within. Looking up the gardens opposite, the children were visible, still immobile in the grass, mingling with the bushes around them, priceless statues. The pipe my wife carried was now raised to provide sufficient range to cover my entry into the building. Michael was crouching in the garden below, bow ready and partially drawn. I drew my pistol and, ducking low, slipped a key from my pocket. I hoped it still worked. It slid easily into the old lock and turned. I eased down the handle and slipped through the opening door, following my gun, which I held close to me, not by design, but because I had not the strength to hold it up with arms extended. Behind me, my son's footsteps crunched lightly on the drive. Inside, the garage was almost unchanged. Items not worthy of transferring littered the long space. Papers were swirled up into piles by the breeze coming through the broken down door to the garden. It felt for a moment as if the past years had not happened, except that I was now entering my own home as if it were a dangerous trap rather than a secure sanctuary. Slightly stooped to pass beneath the glass half of the still intact kitchen door, I slipped down this quiet space to my former office at its end. Looking in, I could see it had been partially turned over. My laptop lay on the floor, the wooden window sills and furniture were missing, replaced with scatterings of dead flies. Looking through the low office window, I checked the back garden momentarily. The fences were now gone, posts cut off close to the ground. The plots beyond were deserted and missing the large trees that once grew in them. Satisfied that we were not going to be flanked, I turned to see my son waiting on the far side of the kitchen door. I brought my pistol to my chest, approached my side of the door jamb, and slipped another key into the lock. The clunk of the latches seemed loud as he pulled the handle down. The door opened slightly on rusty hinges, and, pistol first, I entered our former home with trepidation ahead and Michael close behind. My wooden kitchen floor, which had been glued down so soundly that no one had managed to prise it up, was warped. A musty, damp smell pervaded the air, but the house was silent, save for the sound of the breeze blowing through the open front door and the scattering leaves about the hallway. We swept the house with maximum speed and caution, a well-rehearsed routine we'd used so often to raid for food on our journey. But this time we knew the territory intimately. Careful not to expose ourselves in the doorways, I crept up the stairs, checked the rooms, the wardrobes, behind the doors, as one might when investigating a strange noise in the night. All confirmed clear, we relaxed, and Michael called the others from the door. They approached the house with the same caution and wariness, the discipline that had so far kept them alive staying with them right to the end. Entering by the side door, my wife beamed, and then a tear formed in the corner of her eye as her words trailed off. "We're home. We're home." As we took in our surroundings, like greeting an old friend that had changed little in our absence, the smell of damp was whisked up by our moving bodies. Whilst unoccupied, its cupboards had been flung open in the kitchen, their contents stripped of all but the least worthy of items. Nevertheless, the house felt safe, solid, and familiar. It made me relax. Was our journey really over? Could we begin to build our lives again? I opened the back door, relief filling my body. Stepping into the garden, my pistol now stowed in the strapped pocket to my chest, I could see the plants, tangled and overgrown, which had once formed a beautiful cottage retreat. Chives, with their seed heads abundant, nestled in the fallen golden leaves of a low-growing acer, which had survived the onslaught of the scavengers. An ornamental willow glowed with a mass of fiery naked pokers. The great fir tree that dominated the back border was gone. The lawn was a mass of trampled grasses, poking through piles of rotting needles and wood chip. No sign of our old neighbours could be seen through their exposed patio doors, and melancholy had just begun to creep into my heart when suddenly, from beneath a Jurassic-scale rhubarb leaf near the former fence line, there came a cry that filled me with joy. Looking lean but still glossy, out sidled our tabby, aloof and lazy, as if we'd been gone only a week rather than 3 years. Eyeing the strange bushy creature before her, and sniffing the air, she searched her memory for the origin of that scent, and then quickly ran to me, rubbing herself back and forth on my leg as I stooped to stroke her head and tickle her chin. I murmured sweet nothings to this creature as she purred. I could not even guess at the time she had had. This plucky refugee had perhaps had as many adventures as we had. She slumped supine on the ground, purring in ecstasy as I kneaded her bony body. I was glad beyond belief to see her. I think she felt the same way. Joy sprang in my heart. Our family was finally reunited. The grass was, it seemed, greenest at home. And what of our home? Well, there was no shock or sadness at the damage from the rain in the front wall. There was no sense of injustice at the raiding of our cupboards. We had done it so often to others' homes. Needs must, and no malicious or unjustified damage had been done. Excitement writ large on his face, my son slipped up to his former bedroom, the girls following to frolic at his feet as he sat on his old metal-framed bed. Going upstairs, I slipped into his bedroom to see my children playing together there. The room was cold but familiar, his posters still on the walls. Though she'd never known it, much as children feel at ease around their distant relatives, even though they rarely see them, Eve seemed to sense that this was a place of meaning and safety for us, and in their turn the children explored the house, opening each door with the same sense of excitement they had once opened Christmas presents. As they roamed and used the phone to take photographs, my wife sidled up to me. She kissed me on the cheek, ignoring the grease of my camouflage cream, hugged me, put her uncovered head on my chest so that I could smell her hair. Our family, our home, even our old flea-bitten cat. 3 years of tension and sadness welled in our eyes, and we wept quietly together, wept with the same relieved tears as children happy to see their parents return home after long absence. As we embraced, the rising sun breached the crests of the nearby houses and flooded the bedroom with warmth and light, encapsulating us in our diurnal love. We did not see the shadow in the distant window overlooking the back of the house until we peered, weeks too late, at the background to our family selfie.